fire on a sonsie face, great chieftain of the Puddin-race. Upon them all you take your place, Painch, tripe and thairm. Weel are ye worthy o' grace, as lang's my arm. Your groaning trencher there you fill, your hurdies like yon distant hill. Your pen would serve to mend a mill in time of need, and through your pores the dew distills like amber bead. His knife the rustic-labour dicht, and cut ye open wi' easy slicht, trenching your gushing entrails abrecht like onie a ditch, and then over a glorious sicht, warm-reekin, rich. Horn for horn they streach and strive, Deil tuck the hindmost on the drive, till all our wheels swell case belied are bent like drums, and then all good men must like to arrive, be thanked it hums. Is there that or a French ragout, or a nullet that would staw sue, or a fricassee that would guard you spew? To look down with such a sneering, scornful view on such a dinner. Poor Deil, see him out his trash, as feckless as a withered rash. His spindle shrank against whiplash, not even it, through the bloody floods and failed to dash. Oh, how unfit! Ne mark the rustic haggis fed, the trembling earth resounds his tread. Clap in his well in naive a blade, and watch it whistle, and legs and arms and heads will sned, like taps a thistle. Ye powers will mark and kind your care, and dish them out their daily fare. Scotland wants nae shrinking ware that jobs and luggis, but if you wish, her grateful prayer, gie her a haggis. Ladies and gentlemen, pick up your glass. Make a toast to the haggis. The haggis, Langivar. Before we carry on and hand over to Jim Osborne, I'd like at this stage to make a thank you to the Malcolm Hotel for being sponsors of the Canmore Highland Games, which is on Labour Day weekend, the 4th, 5th of September. We hope to see you there. Now to Jim Osborne.
Throughout the world, in over 200 countries, thousands of people every year celebrate the life of this man, this poet, Robert Burns, the son of a poor tenant farmer who has instilled in us this universal chain of friendship. Let me take you back some 250 years to a clay biggin, a cottage in Alloway, Scotland. It's a miserable night of wind and rain, and the cottage is dimly lit by the glow of a fire and perhaps a candle or two. In the corner of the room there's a bed, whereupon a woman is about to give birth. There are two other women in the house, friends, neighbours perhaps, scurrying about, doing what women do in a time such as this. A few minutes pass, and the cry of a baby can be heard. One of the women takes the child away, cleans it, wraps it in a warm blanket, and lays it back in its mother's bosom. It's a boy, Mistress Broon, it's a boy. And on the 25th of January 1759, Robert Burns was born. Some 37 years later, in a two-storey house in Dumfries, in one of the upstairs rooms, a man lay dying. His wife was to give birth any day. A short while lapses, and the husband passes prematurely from this world. And on the 21st of July 1796, Robert Burns died. On the 26th of July, his wife, Jean Armour, gave birth to the son, Maxwell, whom she named after the doctor who assisted her. Maxwell was the last of 9 children she bore to Robert Burns. The dates, I feel, are somewhat immaterial. It's what's happened in those short 37 years that matter. Burns was born in a house his father planned and built himself, which is now the Burns Cottage Museum. In 1766, his father sold the house and moved the family to Mount Oliphant Farm, southeast of Alloway. Thanks has to be given to his father for knowing the worth of education and seeing to it that Robert and his brother Gilbert were given the best education he could afford. In 1777, the family moved to a farm near Torbolton, where, a few years later, Robert and Gilbert founded the Torbolton Bachelors Club. By the spring of 1784, their father had died, the farm had failed, and they moved to another near Mauchline. It wasn't destined for success either. Burns by this time had written his first book of poems, which was at the publisher. In meantime, he was making plans to emigrate to the West Indies with Mary Campbell, Highland Mary, but unfortunately she died. Possibly the highest point of the summer of 1786, and which probably made up his mind for him, was the printing of the Kilmarnock edition. 612 copies sold out in a matter of weeks, and a second printing was demanded. Suddenly he was the most famous man in Scotland. His poems and songs about local people, local customs and nature touched the heart of a people who were still recovering from the depression of the 45 rebellion in rural Scotland, a people who were very badly in need of someone to write for them and connect with them in their toils, their hardships, love and laughter, a man who would go on to touch the heart of mankind. In November he abandoned his immigration plans and made his way to Edinburgh, where his name was being praised by all classes from the poor to the wealthy and the learned. Only a few months before, he wanted so desperately to escape his life, which at that time was in shambles, with heartbreaks and illegitimate children, the threat of arrest and a lawsuit held over his head, no money, and a failing farm. The capital of Scotland, Edinburgh, which in the second half of the 18th century was the greatest seat of learning in Europe. Men who came in contact with Burns were touched and inspired, and women were also touched and inspired by him, and some were touched, more noticeable results than others. High society in Edinburgh was not complete without Robert Burns. Ministers of the High Church of Edinburgh befriended him, although he very often spoke out against the church, but never against his Maker. Such charisma and persona drew them to him. No social function was complete without him, yet he went home at night near penniless, and shared a box bed filled with straw with a pal from Ayrshire, and a single room in a tenement next to a brothel. He wanted first and foremost to be recognised as a poet. He wanted to collect the money from his poems, have a secure income, and settle down with his family. But instant success took over, and quite frankly, I believe he couldn't handle it. He wrote, "That I have some merit I do not deny, is my own opinion, but I see with frequent wringings of the heart that the novelty of my character and the honest national prejudice of Scotsmen have borne me to a height altogether untenable to my abilities." And the lasses. There is no doubt about it, Robert loved the lasses. He had no intention of becoming a poet until he fell in love, and he wooed them with silver tongue and gallantry, and at the age of 15, his first love was Nell Kilpatrick. "Well, once I loved a bonny lass, aye, and I love her still, and while that virtue warms my heart, I love my handsome Nell. She dresses icy clean and neat, baith decent and genteel, and there's something in her gait, gars onie dress look weel." Nell was but the first of many loves, and perhaps one of the most tender in his life, and so it should be at that age, although it was short-lived. But there was one remarkable woman in his life, and that woman was to become his wife, Jean Armour. Jean and Robert had 9 children, and Jean raised little Bess, one of Robert's illegitimate children, to Anna Park as her own. But the only mother she ever knew was Jean, a truly remarkable woman. He failed at times, like most of us, but understood his fellow man like no other has. When he died, 12,000 people lined the streets of Dumfries and stood silently in the pouring rain as he was carried to his grave at St Michael's churchyard. He was given near a state funeral and lay in state in the uniform of the Royal Dumfries Volunteers. 2 more regiments lined the streets and 3 volleys were fired over his grave. O death, the poor man's dearest friend, the kindest and the best. His works were admired by Tennyson and Wordsworth, carried into battle by Napoleon. They were admired and loved by Abraham Lincoln, and they have been commended by Kofi Annan and Nelson Mandela. And his songs have been set to music by Mendelssohn, Brahms and Schubert. Burns was a man with little art in making money, still less in keeping it. A man, however, with some sense, a great deal of honesty, and unbounded goodwill to every fellow creature. Today, we are at a time where countries are flexing their muscles with the bragging of their nuclear and hyper missiles. We are at an age of intolerance and lack of respect for each other. If Robert Burns were alive today, perhaps he would have this to say. Then let us pray that come it may, as come it will for a' that sense and worth o'er a' the earth shall bear the gree and a' that, for a' that and a' that it's coming yet for a' that man to man, the world o'er, shall brothers be, I wonder. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you a toast to the immortal memory of Robert Burns. To Robert.